When you're babysitting, you're responsible for the most precious thing in someone else's life, their children. It's a trust that weighs heavier than most people realize, especially when you're alone in an unfamiliar house, in an unfamiliar neighborhood, with no one else around. On New Year's Eve, when the rest of the world is celebrating, that isolation becomes even more pronounced. The streets are empty. The neighbors are gone. And if something goes wrong, help might be further away than you think. This is the story of a young woman who took what she thought was an easy job watching 2 kids, till a phone call changed everything. I was 19 and home from college for winter break. Money was tight, so when a family friend asked if I could babysit her 2 kids on New Year's Eve, I said yes immediately. $200 for about 6 hours of work was a fortune to me back then. The family lived about 20 minutes outside of town in this new subdivision that was still being developed. Half the houses were finished, but the other half were just wooden frames wrapped in plastic. It gave the whole neighborhood this eerie, empty feeling, especially at night. The mom, Patricia, walked me through everything before she and her husband left. The kids were 7 and 4, a boy named Oliver and a girl named Sophie. They were already in their pajamas, and she said they'd probably be asleep by 9. She showed me the snacks, gave me the Wi-Fi password, and said they'd be back by 1 in the morning. The first few hours were completely normal. I played board games with the kids, we made popcorn, and I put on a movie. By 8:30, Sophie was asleep on the couch, and Oliver was barely keeping his eyes open. I carried them both upstairs and tucked them into bed. Easy. I went back downstairs and settled onto the couch with my phone, scrolling through social media, just doing normal stuff. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the heating system. Around 10:15, I got this weird feeling. I can't really explain it, just a sudden awareness that something was off. I looked around the living room, but nothing seemed out of place. The curtains were drawn, the lights were on, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I got up and checked the front door locked. I checked the back door in the kitchen, also locked. I even peeked out the window into the pitch-black backyard, but I couldn't see anything. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was just the creepy neighborhood getting to me. Then the phone rang. It was the landline, an old cordless phone on the kitchen counter. I didn't even know people still had them. I picked it up and said hello. Silence, just faint static and what sounded like breathing. I said hello again. Nothing. Then, very quietly, a man's voice said, "Are the children asleep?" My blood went cold. I hung up immediately, my hands shaking. I tried to convince myself it was a prank call, but something about his calm, deliberate tone made my skin crawl. I ran upstairs and checked on the kids, who were both still sound asleep. I stood in the hallway listening, but the house was silent. I went back downstairs, my heart pounding, and was about to text Patricia when the landline rang again. I didn't want to answer it, but I did. Same static, same breathing. Then the voice said, "I can see you." I dropped the phone. I ran to the living room window and yanked the curtain aside, but the street was empty. Just parked cars and half-built houses. I ran to the back window, nothing but darkness. Then I heard it. A knocking sound. Not at the door, at the window. The kitchen window, right behind me. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I spun around, and for a split second, I saw a shape outside the glass. A dark figure, standing right there, just inches away. Then it was gone. I screamed. I couldn't help it. I ran upstairs, grabbed both kids, and locked us all in the master bedroom. Sophie woke up crying. Oliver kept asking what was wrong, and I just held them and called 911. The police arrived in about 8 minutes, which felt like an eternity. They searched the entire property, the yard, the nearby construction sites, the woods behind the house. They didn't find anyone, but they did find footprints in the mud right beneath the kitchen window. And they found a small stepladder leaning against the back of the house, positioned right below the kids' bedroom window. Patricia and her husband came home while the police were still there. She was hysterical. I was a complete mess. The police said they couldn't do much without a suspect, but they increased patrols in the area. I never babysat for that family again. I couldn't even drive down that street without feeling sick. The thing that haunts me is the timing. Whoever that was, they called the house phone. They knew a babysitter was there, and they had positioned that ladder before I even arrived. They had planned this. And if the police hadn't shown up, I don't know what would have happened. There's something about a crowded party that makes us feel safe. The noise, the laughter, the warmth of being surrounded by other people creates this illusion that nothing bad can happen. After all, how could danger find you when you're packed into a room with dozens of witnesses? But here's the thing about crowds. They're distracting. When everyone is focused on the countdown, on the champagne, on that magical moment when one year becomes another, nobody is watching the doors. Nobody notices the footprints tracking through the hallway. Nobody sees the shadow slipping into the basement. New Year's Eve parties are loud, chaotic, full of strangers who could be anyone, a friend of a friend, coworkers plus one, or someone who was never invited at all. The woman who submitted this story thought she was just being paranoid when she noticed a man watching the house from the alley. She convinced herself it was nothing when she saw the front door standing open. But by the time she followed those wet footprints down the hallway, she realized that while everyone else had been celebrating, someone had been waiting in the darkness below. This is her account. This happened about 5 years ago when I was 24. I was living in Chicago at the time, sharing an apartment with my college roommate, Shenna. We'd been invited to a New Year SEV party at her coworker's house, a guy named Marcus, who lived in this really nice brownstone in Lincoln Park. I didn't know Marcus that well, but Jenna assured me it would be a good time, and honestly, I didn't have any other plans. The party was pretty typical, maybe 30 or 40 people, most of them in their mid-20s. Everyone dressed up a little nicer than usual because it was New Year's. Marcus had decorated the place with silver and gold streamers, and there was a playlist going that was mostly early 2000s hits. The vibe was good. Everyone was drinking, talking, having fun. Around 11 o'clock, I stepped outside onto the back patio to get some air. It was freezing. Chicago in December is brutal, but I needed a break from the noise inside. The patio overlooked this small backyard that was mostly dead grass and a wooden fence separating it from the alley behind the house. That's when I noticed him. There was a man standing in the alley, just on the other side of the fence. He was maybe 15 feet away, partially lit by the streetlight on the corner. He was wearing a dark coat and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. At first, I assumed he was just someone walking by, but he wasn't moving. He was just standing there. And he was looking directly at me. I felt this immediate unease, that instinctual feeling that something isn't right. I told myself I was being paranoid, that he was probably just on his phone or waiting for someone. But I couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes were locked onto mine, even though I couldn't see his face clearly. I went back inside and tried to forget about it. I found Jenna, and we did a few shots with some of her coworkers. The countdown was getting closer, and the energy in the house was picking up. But maybe 20 minutes later, I glanced toward the sliding glass door that led to the patio, and I swear my stomach dropped. He was still there. Same spot, same position, same angle of his head, like he was still staring at the house. At me, I grabbed Jenna and pulled her aside. I pointed toward the window and told her there was some guy in the alley who had been watching the house for half an hour. She looked, but by the time she did, he was gone. She laughed it off and told me I was being dramatic. I wanted to believe her. I really did. The countdown started around 11:58. Everyone gathered in the living room, and someone turned on the TV so we could watch the ball drop. I was standing near the hallway that led to the front of the house, holding a glass of champagne, trying to get into the spirit of things. That's when I saw the front door. It was open. Not all the ways, just a few inches, but definitely open. A cold draft was seeping through the gap. My heart started pounding. I knew that door had been closed earlier. I set down my drink and walked toward it slowly. Everyone else was focused on the TV, shouting the countdown. 10, 9, 8. I reached the door and pushed it open a little more, peering out onto the porch. No one was there, but there were wet footprints on the wooden floor, fresh ones, leading from the porch into the house. I followed them with my eyes. They went down the hallway, past the bathroom, and stopped at the door to the basement. The door was slightly ajar. I've never felt fear like that in my life. It was this full-body paralysis, like my brain was screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I could hear everyone behind me shouting Happy New Year and cheering, and I was just standing there staring at that basement door, absolutely knowing that someone was in this house who shouldn't be. I don't know what made me move. Think it was survival instinct. I turned around and walked as calmly as I could back to the living room. I found Marcus and pulled him aside. I told him someone had come into the house and that they might be in the basement. His face went white. He grabbed two of his friends and they went to check. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus came back upstairs. He said the basement was empty, but the small window at the back, the one that led to the alley, was unlocked and open. Whoever had come in had already left. The police came about an hour later. They didn't find anyone and nothing had been stolen. But when they checked the basement more thoroughly, they found something that still makes me sick to think about. There were muddy footprints behind the water heater and pressed into the dust on the concrete floor. There was an imprint like someone had been sitting there, waiting. The officer told us it looked like whoever it was had been down there for a while before leaving through the window. He couldn't tell us why they left or what they had been planning. I think about that night more than I'd like to admit. We're all drawn to the idea of a remote cabin, right? The promise of solitude, of escaping the noise of everyday life, of being surrounded by nothing but nature and silence. It sounds peaceful, romantic, even. But that same isolation that feels so freeing during the day can become suffocating when the sun goes down, when you're miles from the nearest town, when your phone has no signal, when the only sounds are the wind in the trees and the crunch of snow beneath footsteps that aren't your own. The group of friends who shared this story thought they were getting away from it all. A cabin in the Colorado mountains for a New Year's Eve celebration. It was supposed to be the perfect trip. But on their second night, they noticed someone standing at the edge of the tree line. A figure in dark clothing, completely motionless, just watching the cabin. And as the night wore on, as midnight approached and the power went out, that figure got closer. This is their story. This happened 3 years ago, when I was 26. My friends and I rented a cabin in the mountains of Colorado for New Year's Eve. There were 5 of us, me, my girlfriend at the time, and 3 of our closest friends. The cabin was about an hour from the nearest town, down this winding mountain road that got narrower the higher we climbed. The rental listing described it as secluded, which sounded great at the time. Looking back, maybe that should have been a red flag. We arrived on December 30th. The cabin was beautiful, 2 stories with big windows overlooking the forest. There was about a foot of snow on the ground, and it felt like we had the entire mountain to ourselves. The first day was perfect. We unpacked, explored a bit, and spent the evening playing cards by the fire. Nothing unusual at all. It was New Year's Eve when things started to feel off. Around 4 p.m., my friend Derek and I went outside to get more firewood. The sun was already starting to set. As we were loading up the wood, Derek suddenly stopped and pointed toward the tree line. "Do you see that?" he asked. At first, I didn't see anything, just snow and pine trees. But then I noticed a figure, standing maybe 100 yards away, right at the edge of the forest. It was a person wearing dark clothing, and they were completely still. I called out to them. No response. Derek waved. Nothing. They just stood there, facing us. We grabbed the firewood and went back inside. I told the others what we'd seen, and we all agreed it was probably just a hiker. It made sense. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. By 10 p.m., we were all pretty buzzed, counting down the hours until midnight. Someone suggested we go outside and watch the stars, so we bundled up and stepped onto the back porch. That's when we saw him again. Same figure, same dark clothing, but closer now, maybe 50 yards away. Everyone went quiet. I yelled at them, asking what they wanted. My voice just echoed off the mountains. The figure didn't move. We went back inside and locked the doors. My friend Maya wanted to call the police, but we had no cell service. The cabin had a landline for emergencies, but when we picked it up, there was no dial tone. The storm must have knocked out the lines. For the next hour, we took turns watching the windows. The figure was still there, sometimes shifting a few feet, but never coming closer. It just watched. By 11:30, we decided to try and wait it out. At exactly midnight, the power went out. The cabin was plunged into complete darkness. Someone screamed. I grabbed a flashlight. Everyone was accounted for. Then we heard it. Footsteps. On the porch, right outside the front door. Slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching in the snow. They stopped. And then someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the doorknob started to turn. Derek had locked the deadbolt earlier, so the door didn't open. But whoever was on the other side tried it again. And again. Each time, the knob would twist, catch on the lock, and twist back. This went on for a full minute. Then it stopped. I crept to the window and looked outside. The porch was empty. The footprints led up to the door and then back toward the tree line. We didn't sleep that night. We stayed awake until dawn, then packed our things as fast as we could and drove straight back to town. I reported it to the local sheriff. They sent someone up to the cabin, but they didn't find anything. No footprints, the new snow had covered them, no signs of forced entry. The deputy told me it was probably just someone messing with us, but I saw that figure. I heard those footsteps. I watched that doorknob turn. Whoever was out there that night, they weren't just messing with us. They were testing us, seeing if they could get in. And the thing that keeps me up at night is wondering what would have happened if Derek had unlocked that deadbolt.